bring clarity and great decision making in the organization. And Sid is going to be, chatting with us about that. We're going to keep it super interactive. Use the Q&A. If you can convince Bharat to get your camera on and have a chat, I think Sid and I would be down for that too. But yeah, so I'm going to start by just asking Sid to give us a brief background and introduction. I obviously had a chance to see that for myself and learn a bit about that from Bharat as well. But I think Sid would be great to just hear it from you, and then we can kind of kickstart the conversation.
Yeah, thanks, Dhruv. Thanks, Bharat, and thank you all for joining. If I have to introduce myself, I will say it's like a test match, 2 innings, 7 years in India and 7 years abroad. So in India, I started very much like, let's say, a startup journey where at 23, I graduated from a business school and then immediately started my own venture. I did 2 different gigs 3 years apart. And between that, I worked for 1 year in a tech company like Naukri.com, an Indian-bred public company. So I have some experience of working in India as a founder, where people can complain about me, and then as also where I can complain about my manager as an employee. And then I moved to Europe, and in Europe I worked for 2 years in Rocket Internet as a CPO in residence. My job was to create new companies for Rocket. For those who don't know about Rocket, Rocket created companies like Jabong, Foodpanda, and Lazada, and many other e-commerce companies around the world. And I was creating new companies for them as a CPO here. And then now I work for another startup, but now I'm working for Booking. What is important in this journey is to, and why we are here, or I wanted to talk about a bit about, is also just to look at it. I have 2 different perspectives. I've worked in India. I have worked in different capacities in India, same here in Europe, and a bit of the Valley. So I wanted to share a bit of perspective of how things are different and what we can take away from that.
Fantastic. And I think also, Sid, I don't know if you can disclose, but I think at Booking also you have you work on new business lines, right? Not the core.
Yes. Yeah, of course. Booking.com, if you don't know, is the world's biggest OTA for hotel bookings. But now they want to become a travel company, which means they have to do a lot of other verticals which they don't currently do. I'm leading one of those verticals. My job was to come and start from scratch and explore what vertical needs to be built, and then we zeroed down on one, and now I'm building it up globally.
Brilliant, great. So thank you for that. And so I think a lot of the conversation, guys, today will obviously focus both as Sid has seen 0 to 1 on his own. He's seen scaling up. He's seen being in scaled organizations. So it's going to be super interesting because he gets a variety of different types of experiences to the table when we're kind of talking about some of the things we are. And feel free again, like I said, to use the Q&A and kind of ask us questions. We want to try and keep it interactive. So just to start with, a lot of the topic today that both we wanted to unpack together and help everyone here also kind of start thinking on and applying in their day-to-day work is how do you really drive clarity through your product organization and through your organization at large? How do you foster a culture of clarity and good decision making without you being personally maybe fully involved or dictatorial in that? And particularly as we look forward to the next 9 to 12 months in this time of uncertainty, it's though it is unprecedented, it's a lot like the early days of starting a new business or starting a new business line, where a lot of exploration is needed and figuring out what your consumers want and what your product needs to evolve to. So we're going to kind of take that kind of vantage point and go into 3 major themes. We'll start with one, we'll unpack that, we'll have a conversation, go to the second and the third. Best case scenario, we have a really go really deep into 1 or 2, and that's totally fine. But if we're getting low engagement, obviously Sid and I can cover a lot of different breadth as well. So just to start with, and Sid was gracious enough to put some slides together for us as well. I think Sid, I think one thing that obviously product managers, product leaders, founders always like to do is kind of put certain frameworks and certain types of almost operational or guiding structures into decision making, both from a very lightly in the beginning and then potentially scales up and becomes more complex or more evolved in the as a company grows. So I think let's just start there and think about and talk about a little bit of what frameworks you've used to really drive clarity on starting products inside your product organization, and how you kind of thought about those frameworks. And then I'll ask you a couple of questions after that as well.
Sure. Dhruv, maybe you can also keep some tab on time if I go too far on one side, just give me a
Yeah,
heads
I'm
up.
doing that. No problem. I've got it in front of me.
Yeah. So first and foremost, like why am I actually wanting to talk about clarity and why is that important? I think uh, for me, the fundamental shift happened when from a founder, I joined a job. And for a founder, that's a very alien world. Uh, because when you are starting to work on something, you have a boss, uh, basically, you don't have full visibility on everything, which means you're dependent on somebody for answers and navigation and all of that. And also, you are exposed to a lot of conflict resolution, and also you are exposed to a lot of emotions around that conflict negotiation. As a founder, you may not be actually knowing like how things are going in your company on a meeting by meeting basis, how people are feeling, or maybe it's not transparent. So in very simple terms, I realized that lack of clarity creates a lot of stress in people. And in fact, I will take that argument to a level where I can say that if you trace any conflict happening in a meeting room, most of the time a different framing will give a different answer, which means there is some unclarity at a certain level, which is stemming that two different positions. It's very rarely a case where you can it's a technological deadlock where you have to bring in an expert to resolve that, okay, this way is better than the other. It's almost never the case. Most often than not, you have to really underline what is important, what we know, what we don't know. So we have to bring a lot of clarity around that. So that's why, so if you can just go to my next slide. Yeah. So what is the actual power of clarity? I think bringing clarity is the most natural way to resolve conflicts. Uh, Clarity reduces stress, it reduces anxiety. And fundamentally, if you start providing clarity, you will actually set up a culture where people will start to seek clarity, because they will feel that that is a natural component of their being. And actually, you will see that people are in your company are actually seeking help at the right time.
Absolutely.
So so question becomes, what is clarity? And Often we mistake clarity with certainty. uh, Clarity is not ensuring that you will achieve a goal. Clarity is not also about laying down the steps taken to achieve a goal. Clarity is actually about defining the game and the rules of the game.
Mhm.
So and going forward, it's also about defining the team which are part of the game, and what is the role of each team member. Let me take a best analogy of football. I actually learned from experience it's better to take experience analogy of a sport than a war. uh,
Yeah,
so so if you look at football, I think everybody can understand, like football, the whole idea of everybody is every team is to score more goals, and there are a lot of rules around it. But as we grew more sophisticated over the period of time, in years, we saw a lot of specialist roles come in. You have a defender, you have a midfielder, you have like a striker, all of that. In conventional world, I could have always said, okay, here are 11 of us, and there's 11 of them. Our objective is to score more goals. So anybody who can score a goal will get $1 million, and then the game starts.
hmm,
What will happen in that game? There will be hardly any team play, because everybody would try to optimize for individual, and everybody fundamentally feels that he or she, himself or herself, is responsible for victory. So
hmm,
everybody is operating under a very tremendous let's say, own, like self-defined pressure, and trying to achieve victory, because everybody wants to achieve the goal. But what happened was we created certain roles. And in football, it's a very good example, because you are able to very easily understand what is the role of each, at least like a defender, midfielder, and striker in playing as a part of the game.
Hmm.
And on one side, it's also very easy for us to say, when I'm coming to a defender, that if your job is to not let anybody score a goal. That is one reality. In second reality, you can always say to a defender that your job is to ensure that you create enough pressure on any attacker that he is not able to strategize. He has to release the ball as fast as possible, hence is more unlikely to score. What's the difference between these two? In the first case, if you say a defender, your job is not to uh, so there should be no goal. You
Yeah.
are putting a lot of pressure on the defender to really achieve an outcome without any support in the middle.
Hmm.
But if you are a defender whose job is to actually create enough pressure on the striker, then this is something you control. So the entire focus is that this is something very easy for me to understand as a defender. That okay, my job is to keep, not let this person go out of hand, keep this person under pressure so that this person releases the ball as fast as possible. Uh, and the outcome is a derivative product of my action which I control. It makes me in a much better, much more relief position. So coming back, uh, clarity is not about ensuring that the confidence that we will achieve our goal. It is actually about breaking down a big problem into very specific sets of, I say the game, what is the game we are playing, and what are the rules of the game, and what is my role in that. uh, Often I've also seen like CEOs, they actually love to play this thing. They sometimes peg product and marketing on the same objective. we want to we want to get go from 1 million to 5 million customers. So the same goal has been given to product and same goal has been given to marketing, and whoever wins. And for me, that's a pretty that's a very bad way of approaching this, because you will always see, and often it happens in companies where you have different functions which are actually fighting against each other then along with each other. And most of the time, in this case, the conflict happens on individual roles of these functions.
Yeah. I think if I can jump in, Sid, and before we go into frameworks, I think one thing, one of the points, obviously lots of things here you've said too interesting to talk about, but I think there's also in the core of product, right? Because you also, while you're trying to drive clarity and defining it instead of in outcomes, but in this kind of framework of games and rules you're playing, it also encourages a lot of experimentation. It also encourages that you have a lot of shots on goal, and you don't get beaten down by winning and losing, right? And I mean, the best sports team at the end of the day, they are kind of, the athletes are always out there giving 110%, and they always know the outcome has so many other variables out of their control. So I think, I like the way you kind of describe that, because it also kind of addresses that point around still keeping people trying, even because a lot of times, a lot of those experiments or things you try might fail, right?
Yes.
I think and I think, one thing I want to do, because you kind of touched upon it, how have you, maybe one of the things you can talk about is when, when you're talking about clarity or driving clarity, how have you seen also how it's important to take, how important is it to be like macro clarity, right, for all teams, and then kind of like, a product team, because this conflict also sometimes arises when maybe people are giving different games and different rules, and like you said, right, they're butt heads. So how have you seen that play out, and maybe how has that happened, or how have you seen overcome that, or been able to work around it?
In fact, this very much, I would say, is a day-to-day scenario in a way. Especially, let's say, if you are a leader who has some macro size of resources, and and of course you inherit a very big goal. So let's say your goal can be, how can we improve, go from 1 million transactions to 5 million transactions, and now you have, let's say, 10 teams. So eventually the goal, the part becomes is, how do I actually let's say deconstruct this goal into bite-sized pieces which all teams can actually participate in. But I think fundamentally what we have to ensure is that for every team there is let's say they are very clear on what are their role in that ultimate game of 1 million to 5 million. and
Got it.
how is not only their role, how is other teams playing, what is other roles of the other teams, so that,
Hmm.
and the net sum, and it has to be very obvious for everyone, it has to be very dumb for everyone to really understand
Hmm.
that it takes all 10 teams to achieve that goal. Because
Interesting.
what sometimes happen is, actually we are not so scientific in terms of number of resources,
Hmm.
and if we realize that that there is only need of 8 teams, not two, not 10 teams,
Hmm.
everybody knows that. People will
Hmm.
fundamentally figure out that there are 2 teams which are redundant, and that will again create tension.
Hmm.
So what is really important is that you actually deconstruct it to a team level. How you do that is a separate topic in itself.
Hmm. Hmm. Got it.
uh, One thing I would also like to add is like, uh, uh, creating clarity is not about thinking clearly. It's a time consuming product, is a process.
Hmm.
Because I think everybody of us has heard of OKRs, we have heard of goals. So there are different methods in which people have taken attempt of at least ensuring very that there is a very simple mathematics behind how we are achieving certain objectives. And OKR is a very great example of, is very, you just have to look at a team's OKR to know what this team is doing,
Hmm.
right? And in ideal world, all these OKRs should add together to a final goal,
Sure.
right? But even creating those OKRs, reviewing them is a time-consuming process. So,
Yeah.
which puts a time horizon pressure on clarity itself. Like you cannot create clarity month by month. You have to create clarity for a quarter or half a year at a time.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Do you want to go get into the frameworks?
Yeah. So let's go to the next one. My next slide. So
Fun.
yes. So this is one thing I think for the viewers. I think one thing would be interesting to note is like, uh, just when you look at these frameworks, the idea is not to like take notes or really understand the story behind it, not the actual framework itself. When you actually come to actual need, you will find it on the internet many times. So just sit back and really focus on the story which I'm trying to tell behind it.
Yeah.
So when you talk about clarity, the inverse of this for me is conflict.
Hmm.
And I see that there are different levels of conflict. And most of the conflicts actually start with, let's say you can have a goal conflict. And a good example of a goal conflict is that one team wants to actually build a new feature for retention, and
Hmm.
let's say your tech comes with the request for refactoring a tech stack.
Yeah.
So eventually they have 2 different goals. One wants to actually solve something for a consumer. One wants to protect the health of this of
Hmm.
your tech stack. Then you have a value conflict. A value conflict is that typically a good statement could be, we should focus on the customer experience, not on immediate monetization. Sometimes investors push for monetization early. You think, no, you're not ready for it because your customer experience will be really poor. There's also a role conflict. Uh, I have heard this multiple times. Product says marketing is bringing bad quality traffic. Marketing says your product sucks at converting my traffic,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? So there are method conflicts which you will probably have heard many times. Sometimes if you have to build an extra extend a feature, sometimes you say, okay, let's extend the monolith. Sometimes but the tech team says, no, let's create this into a microservice. uh,
Hmm.
and then you actually argue about that.
Yeah.
And lastly is resource conflict. Typically you want it yesterday, but then you see there are not enough resources available. So
Hmm.
you want certain resources to be allocated faster, somebody cannot.
Yeah.
But
No, I think we've all seen these and very versions of these in our career so far. Yeah.
yeah, and what is really important to understand is more behind most of this conflict, fundamentally there's a goal or value conflict.
Hmm. At the
Because
end of the day.
yes, at the end of the day, because let's say when the resources were being planned, uh, and you finally end up in a situation where you need resources and it's not available. There was a planning process in some way or the other. At that point of time, maybe there was a different goal,
Hmm.
or if the reality shifted in between, there is again still maybe your goals have adapted, but the customer care goals have not been adapted as yet, right?
Sure.
So eventually you will see that goal and value conflict actually takes a really big pie. And as we as leaders, this is where we can actually add the maximum value.
Maximum. Yeah,
So
absolutely.
so in if you flip it other way around, I think as a leader, our biggest uh, value is to create clarity around these whole five, let's say, nuggets in that sense.
Hmm.
And you can understand, like, while goal clarity and not everything is, let's say, they're all applicable to review at a different timestamp. So for example,
Hmm.
your goals don't change month over month. Your
Hmm.
values actually don't change at all in that
Hmm.
sense.
Hmm.
It takes something very substantial, more than a pivot, to change your values.
Hmm.
uh, Roles can change from project to project in some case, or it can change from, let's say, department for function wise with pivots, or with business models.
Hmm.
Methods change all the time. In fact, on the other side, method is something you uh, hold least tightly. Like, you,
Yeah.
you you
Yeah.
have a most loose grip on method. Method is the most easiest thing to negotiate on. In fact,
Hmm.
uh, if as a leader you are uh, spending a lot of time on method, then you are in the wrong place.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
And lastly, about resources. Resources also can change in depending on your function on a month-to-month basis or quarter
Hmm.
to quarter. In some cases, like in the big companies like Booking, it only changes on an annual basis.
Got
So,
it.
so I think to answer your question, like, I think, how do you bring uh, clarity around your org? I think first is you to have defined these for your entire org in itself. Like,
Hmm.
what is the goal of your org? What is the value? Around, so what is your key decision making principles? For
Hmm.
example, I was once told by my CMO that we only buy insurance if either if something goes wrong, either the damage is too big or the frequency of damage is so high that we will go bankrupt in the end.
Hmm.
If neither of the conditions are true, we will not buy insurance. uh,
Interesting.
which actually means also for, you can use this to actually resolve a lot of tech conflicts, because
Hmm.
you always have your tech lead or your engineering manager who comes and tells you you should refactor the whole tech base, or because of this and that. Basically, he's selling you an insurance
Hmm.
for future. So
Yeah.
these methods becomes like, how do you make decisions? So that becomes value. Your
Absolutely.
value can be customer first, but you have to
Hmm.
really be clear to the team, like, what does customer first means.
Yeah. And drive that through.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It is so interesting. We've been actually doing this a lot internally because I think a lot of us, obviously, on this call are rethinking some of these things in light of, like, what changes in our world and around us. And I think, to this point, even internally, we've been re-clarifying as much as humanly possible who for us is the consumer, what's the goal for them, what is the value we're trying to create. And it's so interesting also how you kind of need to almost repeat this regardless of like current state of markets and current state of environment. There is obviously people. I mean, I think most leaders also sometimes forget that at the front line of your organization, they may not be as connected on this every day. And I think the other big part of this is it's not there's I don't think there's any frequency high enough where you're kind of just making this clarity come to life, throughout time as you kind of keep going, right, at different scales of your organization.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, I have learned, watching, let's say, um, CEO of my company to all the leaders in my company,
Yeah.
their fundamental role is to repeat key messages in every meeting.
Yeah.
Uh, and second is actually to frame every problem in the light of these uh, messages. So if you
Hmm.
are given a problem, like, should we, uh, uh, you know, uh, should we build new features or should we actually refactor the tech stack? You
Hmm.
have to reframe that conversation on what is our goal. Uh,
Hmm.
what are we trying to achieve here, and what will each of these get us. And then eventually you will have to then say, okay, like how do we make decisions? Uh, what impact will this bring for the customer? Will the customer experience improve? And so we have to always be repeating our key messages and just reframing all the conflicts through these lenses. And that stops us from a very big temptation to go ahead and answer it for our team.
Yeah. Shall I go to the next slide? We have a question, but I think I'll wait a bit for it. It's more about team structures. Should I keep going on the slide?
Actually, I would like to take that question because I want to take some time, because in my next slide, I will go into individual, let's say, different frameworks, how individual teams create clarity for themselves. But overall, as a leader yourself, or who has people who depend on them for output, if it is clear for people on what their role is, because
Cool. So I think, guys, feel free to put in more questions in the Q&A. The one I got actually very relevant to what you're going to go into, probably a precursor, is, before you kind of start going into the definition of the game and the rules of the game, before you go into...
Dhruv, 1 second.
Sure.
Something... Yeah, sorry. Some other audio started on my call.
No problem. Is this all good now?
Yes, sorry.
Great. So, So before you kind of go into how the frameworks apply to different teams, the question we got actually was, how do you actually structure your product team across, and here they're asking across components and metrics. So this is Naveen Gurnani who's asked this question. Are you structuring them around the roles around things that they build? So potentially, around the role that they play, or do you structure them around the metrics or the goals that they're trying to meet? If it's retention, if it's, DAUs or whatever it is. And, what's a way to kind of approach that? Because before we go into your next part, which is going to be around the frameworks of conflict resolution in those, I think there's a very valid question as a precursor. How do you kind of separate those roles out in the first place, or the teams out, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is almost like a game design, right? How do you design the game? So let me give you an example. So for example, I have had experiences where in one of my companies I was working for, it was Blacklane. It was like Uber Black, a global ride sharing, airport transfer company. And I had 10 teams. And the way all these 10 teams were created, where they were all mapped to a product. So where, for example, you had, we had, of course, our consumer products like desktop, we had mobile. Then we had internal API products. We had customer care centric internal customer care products. We had finance and accounting, all of that. So that was one way I did it. And what did I learn from that experience is this. It was inefficient for us to do that, because what we are basically saying is that since we are putting one team on every product is equally important. And also the fact that the way we will win is by putting growing all products in with equal resources. How I learned here in booking is that you eventually have you have to understand your flywheel. What is your core flywheel? So for example, in booking, our core flywheel starts with pricing and availability. If the customers don't find a hotel in every village of the world, and if you don't find it at the right price, you don't really care about experience.
Yeah, fair enough.
You don't really care about, let's say, payment methods. You don't really care about many other things, right? So, and our flywheel is mostly like, if we have the broadest supply, we will have most option for the customer. We will have more customers buying our product. Since we will have more customers buying our product, people, the market will give us more supply. More vendors would like to work with us, and hence that is our flywheel. So for you to really start looking at distributing your teams, you have to really understand, like, what is your core product today? What is your core flywheel? So in our in my word, I would say we would ring fence pricing and availability first. So most of my resources will actually go in making sure that pricing and availability is being served the best, because that is the core nugget around my product. So
Yeah.
once you ring fence those, then you start to see, okay, what are the other drivers which will give me growth,
Hmm.
and how what is your bet in terms of how far are they from their base. So you when you let's say this, if you create a new payment method, let's say bank transfers, you
Hmm.
initially have a baseline,
Yeah.
but you have a sense of industry benchmark, let's say that, right?
Sure.
So how much, like, how fast can you actually approach improve your baseline above and to get to the industry standard?
Hmm.
So you will actually create some kind of prioritization framework, and eventually you prioritize what are the next levers you will want to pull.
Hmm.
And uh, lastly, you would also look at, am I building a company only for today, or am I building my company for tomorrow?
Hmm.
So what are my bets for tomorrow? And in that sense, not necessarily I'm building for tomorrow, like on the bets, but I'm at least validating. I'm constantly validating my future ideas.
Hmm.
So you, so we use literally these kind of framework to decide what is my resource allocation required.
Got it. And where the team should be kind of focusing the attention.
Yes.
Got it.
Around the layering, should the team be on a customer axis or should be a team on tech axis? I think it very much depends on what are you optimizing for. Are you optimizing for great uniform customer experience across all platforms, or you are actually optimizing for speed? Can your business afford different feature sets on different platforms?
Hmm.
If probably if you're a bank, no. But if you are maybe, let's say, I don't know, an Uber maybe.
Hmm.
So these
Got
are
it.
all goes into coming back to the clarity, like what is the game you're playing, and there's a different strategies for every game.
Yeah. So I think I'm Naveen pinged again, and so he's asking for a TLDR to that. And Naveen, I think I don't think what Sid is trying to say is just about around the core problem. What Sid is trying to say is that it's around your core levers, that you prioritize your levers and build teams around your levers. You try and ring fence what's the core of your flywheel with the max and the most justifiable resources, right? So right, they said in pricing and availability. In their case, a hyperlocal provider, it probably is like logistics or fleet. But then once you protect that, you kind of go kind of concentric circles and say what other levers help this. And Sid, an extension of that question to me or to you is then what you're also saying technically is that as your levers evolve, as your company grows, you may also change what your teams are focused on. Teams may live and die, problems may get solved, and that lever may go away. Is that a good way to understand it, right? Because it's not always they'll stay on the same thing. They'll move to the next lever, right? Or to the
Yeah, absolutely. However, when I say, I'm a bit cautious about saying that teams will live and die, because it takes let's say a lot of work and effort to create a team which is productive and which delivers.
sure,
So
yeah,
in
absolutely.
that case, I would, let's say, be a bit careful to interpret it that way, that I can actually strategize and allocate a team to a new problem every 6 months. I would try to
Hmm.
create a year-long visibility of that, because it takes a lot for teams to come together and deliver.
Hmm.
But again, different scenarios, different thing. But in a principle, you're right. Uh, However, if you are working on problems which will be solved in 6 months and the team can get disbanded, it's more of a signal that the problem is too shallow to be prioritized in the first place.
Fair enough. Yeah, good way to think about it. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Any other questions, guys? On this is just a starting point. I know we've kind of jumped into dense matter, and we're having. I'm enjoying it. So Sid and I will keep asking questions, but obviously we want to keep it open. Any thoughts around conflict and clarity? Got it. So Abhishek's got a question around, more around what's happening. How do you adapt to this kind of thinking and conflict resolution or driving clarity um, during this time period, and particularly with new ideas, as and accelerating certain new ideas where you have high uncertainty, and accelerating certain releases. Yeah, I know we have a section at the end where we're going to go through that, but if you want to take it on now, happy to, jump into it. I think this is something at top of mind for everyone probably right now.
Sure. So in fact, I will fork this into two different questions.
Sure.
So let's talk about the new ideas for a bit, and then in this uncertainty, I will handle it in the end.
Take it.
So when I joined Booking, I was actually given a very open-ended topic to work on. So Booking was trying to become a travel company, and the number of verticals they would go into was not decided. So they
Okay.
gave me one word called shopping.
Hmm.
They go and build
Yeah.
shopping.
Okay.
Now everybody would wonder, like, why is Booking talking about shopping?
Hmm.
Because every traveler shops.
Sure.
Uh, and Chinese travelers alone buy $120 billion worth of good in their travel.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the question became like, uh, where do you start? Like, what do you even build? So there is no, there is nothing, which is like it's a clean canvas, right? So for me, the first step was to actually understand what is success
Hmm.
in this. So eventually, the definition of success I could extract from my sponsor, who was the CMO of the company, was that
Hmm.
in first of all, there's a 3-year definition of success. So if there cannot be a success in 1 year, like of course every time you can have a definition of success, but a new business cannot be built overnight. It takes 3 years to build a business. So he said 10% of our customers should be on board the new vertical and be using the product, and we don't care about money. It should be self-sustaining unit. So we don't
Okay.
have to put investment.
Hmm.
Okay, that is 3-year success. So what is 1 year
Hmm.
success in that?
Hmm.
So 1 year success was that we should have learnings. We should have
Hmm.
great understanding of customer insight. What is that customer wants from us? What are the core customer problems? And we should have a validated product by the end of the year.
Hmm.
And this basically starts the this is basically the arena in which you have to play, right? So first was to clarify like what is the mandate behind what you're doing and why you're doing that and what is important. And then we created like some stage gates. Like first was to find all the problem customers have, but most importantly, what was the biggest problem customer has.
Hmm.
Second was to validate the problems at scale.
Yeah.
uh, and what was important is that my team or resource staffing was also done in the same way. My initial staffing was one PM, one designer, one developer.
Okay.
Why was that one developer? Because first, to actually have a tech representation on every idea,
Yeah.
what are we getting into? Second was that we had to do lean pilots, and
Hmm.
eventually I wanted a tech leader also be part of the customer empathy to really know what is going on with the customer and everything.
Hmm.
Uh, and the roles of each of them was very clearly defined. Like, what are you doing in the starting point? So when we hired a developer, we were very clear that we were looking for a self-organizing, self-motivated developer because there will be a lot of idle time.
Hmm. Hmm.
So what I'm trying to get at within this whole story is like you have to create this clarity at all layers, and eventually coming down to a role of every developer, and you have to be very open about it, about your constraints. That like we are doing it, and even if we find out that there is not a big enough problem, it will still be a success. So invalidation
Hmm.
is the same success as validation.
Yeah.
And after 1 year, we might actually walk out and to go back to the management and say there is no business to be made.
Hmm.
And the role of and what is your so while the designer's role was to work on customer insights on research, uh, PM was hypothesis building, uh, creating solution hypothesis, and then again testing. Developer was there to create a what I used to call it. His role was the possibility of invention,
Hmm.
because the logic was simple. If shopping in travel is such a big opportunity, why is nobody doing it?
Yeah.
The reason nobody is doing it because some very valuable part of the is missing in the ecosystem, in the value chain.
Hmm. Hmm.
uh,
Hmm.
and which means that for us to be successful, we have to create that missing link in the value chain by ourselves.
Yeah.
So something needs to be invented, and that developer's role was to stand for that possibility. How can we change something fundamentally,
Interesting. And
right?
be there to
So
think about that. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, and this stemmed from the fact that when we were doing user interviews, the developer was also participating in user interviews,
Hmm.
uh, and he basically mentioned that, oh, this is very valuable for me.
Hmm.
Uh, but the bar was not good enough at valuable. The question was like, what do you do with these insights?
Hmm.
So the role was defined for every individual
Who was
person in
part
that.
of that. Got it. So I
Yes.
think, and so Abhishek, to that, I think also when Sid, correct me if I'm wrong, this scales, right? Obviously, Sid is talking about a very large org. Maybe you want to give context. How many folks in the product team in booking?
Oh,
Like,
booking overall has about 200 PMs, so probably 200, 250.
yeah, 220 PMs, right? And so the way Sid's kind of, obviously, when he says 10% of users, that's, from a scaling perspective, it's a much larger thing than, where you may be thinking about a much smaller new ideas. But I think definitely, and this type of approach scales, that having a 3-year goal, or even maybe in your context, it may not be that far out, but at least as far out as you can be, and then kind of having subgates. I also really like the way you thought about the role of the PM and the role of invention. I think the one mistake a lot of us make, and we forget about, is that a great experiment takes the hypothesis and at least gives you success fail, not just gives you nothing, right? The worst experiment is when you don't know either of those. And so, I like the way you said that success is also an invalidation, and particularly for new
Yeah,
ideas. I think a lot of us forget that we can't judge it by the outcome of that new idea. It's really like, is this valid or not? Sometimes just that's all you're chasing, and you want to prove that. So that's awesome. We're getting some great questions here. Should I do one more before we jump in? We're at
yeah,
about 9:45. So Bharat, like another what, half an hour, 45 minutes? Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
30
Cool.
minutes is good.
30 minutes. Okay, cool. So I'll do one more question, Sid, and then we can move forward. So I think, Lohit has this question. He was talking about, when from the list, down from goals down to resources, there's obviously with time, different things are dependent on each other and create conflict with each other. So what he's basically talking about it is goals, values, roles, methods, resources. Um, uh, change. They all, as they or evolve with time, they create conflicts between themselves as well. So what is to be prioritized when we want to solve the conflict between these five, right? What do you peg as, if there is a conflict between them, because of kind of evolution of goals in the organization? How do we prioritize, and how do we solve that conflict, considering that everything is important in an organization or team? So it's a little tricky as a question, I will say. But it's I think he's trying to understand that between these five, as things change, how do you pick which one is the one that should be kind of driving it? I think you did answer it a bit in the beginning. He talked about goal and value being the key drivers, which shouldn't be changing, frankly speaking. But I think,
yeah,
Sid, you want to maybe go into it a bit more, because I think this is important to understand for folks, right?
absolutely. Yeah, and I have actually let's say a long answer to that, uh, but I will give you a gist of it because I had this one of the projects I'm working on. So I
Ah,
have a friend who is a master's in org transformation,
sorry, in
and
masters in
he's a champion in org transformation.
org
Uh,
transformation. Okay, got it.
and one thing I found key ally in him is that I believe there is a right organization for a right founder. Like in the sense, not one founder cannot build any random org. There is a typical
Hmm.
org structure which is uh, right for that founder. So, for example,
Hmm.
if a founder does not believe in ecology because the founder believes I paid my taxes, so government should take care of the environment, then just making like we are carbon footprint positive, we care about environment. That statement doesn't sit natural with the founder.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So what I'm saying is that these values are actually very close to how founders behave. They are shaped by the
Hmm.
founders in that sense, or
Hmm.
let's say the founding team, and which also means that these values are very fundamental to why you are doing this business at all. Like why are you not doing jobs and actually creating a company?
Hmm.
So values for me are non-negotiable in that sense
They should never
because
change for
yeah
that org.
because
Yeah.
because let's say even if like coronavirus comes, right, we can always have this decision like let's this thing is not interesting anymore because nobody's traveling, so let's shut shop and let's go home, right?
Hmm.
But we still want to do something, right? Why is that, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
if somebody wants to be a millionaire and has already been made millions, again, can say, okay, I've done my gig, so let's show and go home. But there has to be something more, like why are you doing this business, and what are the core values on which you make decisions. Uh,
Mm.
so, for example, you may want to build a business because you believe that consumers are better off with competition. So, so you want to expose all the competition, which means you want to become a meta, and
Mm.
consumers benefit by actually exercising more options. That's
Mm.
your fundamental thesis, and that should not. So, more options is good. So that
Yeah.
value will not change even if the virus comes or something like that. You will pivot to a
Mm.
different thing which still protects that value. So,
Mm.
and then your goals have to be in line with the value. Can you achieve? Oh, because there are many paths to Rome.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you achieve a goal by protecting your values? Because if that's not true, then there is again no point in doing anything,
Mm. 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 Mm.
right? Because your goal may be to go from 1 to 5 million customers, or to improve revenue from 10 to 50 million. But one partner can say, "Give me exclusivity, I will double my commission."
Mm.
But is it in line with your values? Would you reduce competition to get more revenue? Uh, and so if you actually go down this path, you will find that there is a very clear hierarchy in that sense of how to resolve these conflicts. And
Mm.
in most of my conversation, I'm, let's say, I'm the point to take home is that how has much more situation specific nuance. What is more important is that it's possible to achieve clarity at all 5 levels, and
Mm.
you have to protect this clarity for at least 6 months or certain horizon. You cannot throw it away at the first sign of resistance. You have to realign, reframe, but it
Mm.
is possible to do that. So, for example, resources, right? It might happen that somebody marketing promised you to have like I don't know, $5 million on ad spend to drive
Mm.
traffic,
Mm.
but
Mm. Mm.
that changed, right? But you have the right to question, why did it change? Did the goal change, or did the role of marketing change?
Mm.
Uh, so you have to really understand, if the role changed, then why did the role change? Again, did the goal change,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
did the value change? Like we don't want to do business this way,
Mm. Mm.
right? So what changed? So every time you can negotiate, you can really go up the ladder and really first figure out, did something change on between the goal and the value. If nothing changed, then why else something else is changing? And eventually you learn and iterate, so that next time when you're planning, you're at least planning for 6 months.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think just reflecting on that, I think some of the best founders I've interacted with, met some of whom are obviously colleagues and peers. Their consistency in the value of what they're trying to provide consumer, you're absolutely right, is unwavering, right? It never
Yeah.
changes. Like whatever come and go happens, like the world can fall apart. But I think you're right about the fact that they approach the problem with the same type of mentality they always started with, and build around it. Yeah. We've got questions coming in, guys. I'll answer some of the more COVID-related ones later. We're going to talk a little bit about towards the end as well. I think Joel had a clarification on the point you made earlier. Identifying gap in value chain, shouldn't that be the PM's responsibility instead of the developers? I do think that was the PM's responsibility, or maybe in that example you had given in shopping, the role of figuring out the gap in value chain, was that the PM's responsibility or the developers?
No, responsibility was the PM's.
Ah,
But so, for example, I can give you a very quick response to that. The
yeah.
biggest problem when you come to shopping is that while you spend $200 in a hotel at one place, when it comes to shopping, you spend that money across 10 different merchants.
Ah, correct.
So,
Hmm.
and there is no one entity, one player in the market which has access to all 10 transactions.
Hmm.
You may use different credit card. uh, all merchants have different POS.
Correct.
So the responsibility of developer was, can he create something like a app framework or something where we can actually have access to all 10 transactions, like a loyalty mechanisms,
Got
uh,
it.
something like that. So in this case, it was his role was to always challenge the PM in terms of what's possible and what can be unlocked.
But the finding was the PM's job. Finding the gap was the PM's job. Developer. Got
Yeah.
it. Awesome. Guys, okay, so we're gonna obviously answer more stuff, but I want to jump ahead because we've and this is great, guys, and thank you for the questions. Obviously, should we go forward to the next
Yeah.
slide? Okay,
Yeah.
awesome.
So
Good.
actually, next slide is more about your next question, but let's keep going. So I think your next question was mostly about how can leaders drive clarity at an individual level.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
and just to kind of expand that for the group, how do you take this thinking, conflict resolution, clarity driving, and take it from us understanding it, which we're obviously enjoying and breaking down, but make it a culture, make it come down to the individual level, foster it in your organization. We'll talk a little bit about the differences you've seen in India and Europe and different types of people you work with, given the different sizes of companies you work with as well. But yeah, so that's kind of what we're gonna get into next, right? So yeah, go for it, Sid.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is one thing I'm firm believer in. That let's say this in India, if you ask anyone like why do you come to work? Why do you show up at work every day?
Hmm.
Everybody assumes, and maybe rightly so as well, that people work for money,
Hmm.
right? Everybody wants to be rich. It's about money. In fact, I was like that as well.
Hmm.
But that is not true, right? Because the euphoria of money is one day when the salary hits the bank, but rest of the day you still show up to work.
Hmm.
So what is the intrinsic motivation? For me, and I'm a believer in this, that intrinsic motivation is consisting of autonomy, mastery, and purpose.
Hmm.
These three things are need of every individual working to be motivated.
Hmm.
So, what is autonomy? Autonomy, I think everybody understands in a very oversimplistic way. So, for example, uh, it happened, I think, in Snapdeal or something like Snapdeal wanted to partner with Domino's.
Ah.
So you call a PM in the room and you just say, we have to partner with Domino's. Go figure, go do.
Hmm.
And that can sound like autonomy. I
Yeah.
give so much autonomy for PM because he can just basically decide when, how, what, and a lot of other things, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But while this is good, but directionless autonomy is anarchy.
Hmm.
So you have to constantly frame autonomy. So autonomy to achieve what? So there is a constant obligation to define what good is.
Okay.
So for example, an autonomy can be, for example, like why are we partnering? Why is Snapdeal getting along with Domino's?
Hmm.
Uh, because Snapdeal wants people to open their apps multiple times in a month. Currently, users use Snapdeal app only 3 times in a month, but
Sure.
probably the hypothesis, the idea is that if they if they have Domino's and many other utilities like that,
Hmm.
they will open the app much more time,
Correct.
and they can also use that extra basket value to cross sell coupons of other discounts.
Bilkul. Hmm.
Uh, so in this case, what is that we want to achieve from the integration itself? So first you want is a proof that having a Domino's logo has substantial interest from the audience,
Correct.
right? So you have to give some certain directions, like what is
Hmm.
that you expect. So what is good? So evidence
Hmm.
that audience wants it is good. Second is if we can prove that audience is transacting on Domino's is even better. Third,
Hmm.
if we can prove loyalty is the best,
Ultimate. Correct.
ultimate,
Correct. Correct.
right?
Huh.
And this has to be done in 3 months.
Huh.
So in 3 months we want to go back to Domino's and tell them are we going deeper or not,
Hmm. 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 Hmm.
right? So that is the framing behind autonomy, where you are uh, you giving this person a very good frame of reference of what is good in this, what is success,
Yeah.
and what is the time frame you want your result back in.
But you're giving them
Okay,
flexibility to get to that thing, right? To play
yeah,
within
to
those
define
bounds. Yeah.
exactly,
Yeah.
right. And also what is the role of that person, again it's always very good to highlight what is the role of that person, what are we counting on him for.
Yeah. Yeah.
So is his role to actually get it delivered by the team? His role is to get all the stakeholders aligned to make sure that it's also equally well understood by all stakeholders. So you have
Hmm.
to also underline what is the role you are
Hmm.
expecting this person to play. And
Sure.
especially one thing we also mistake, uh, uh, let's say there is never a clear articulation between what is my role and what is my report's role. So even if the PM reports to me, I
Yeah.
always forget to articulate what is my role in the project.
Huh. Bilkul. Yeah. For sure.
Because every reportee always wonders, what does my boss do? and there is
Yeah.
and there is never a explicit conversation about that. And but I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
that is
sure.
always worth it, because so I had this conversation with my, because here in Europe everybody is very demanding
Huh,
in terms of the clarity is the mantra. You cannot evade questions. So
huh,
I had to answer them that I am a cheerleader for them. My
huh,
number one job is to create clarity for them. Second, my
huh,
job is to be cheerlead for what they do, make sure right people know everywhere. My
huh,
job is to know all other stakeholders in the company so that I can resolve conflicts for them, get their attention
huh.
when required. And my
Yeah,
job is to make sure they have all the resources. So in that sense, when on every project basis, what is that you want to achieve from that, and what is that they need to achieve for you? So this is
got it.
also a great
Yeah.
framing.
So all the PMs on the call, you know what you're gonna ask your boss tomorrow. What is your role? I think I have
Yeah.
one question here. Sid, how do you take on autonomy, right? And this is like I think a lot of us try to practice this, particularly in right now we're working from home. There is so much decision making to be done for all of us from every level. But one of the things that also you don't want to come off is being heavy handed, right? And
Ah.
dictatorial when you're defining this, right? So how do
Mhm.
you bring the horses to the water? What has worked for you? What's been your style of making a person understand this autonomy applies to you and it is actually in your benefit for me to define this for you versus me trying to put you into a box, right?
So for me, I think autonomy is a relationship between two people.
Hmm.
Because one part is always true, is that you have to define the problem very well, and you have to
Hmm.
define what is success. That is, I think, let's
Sure.
say, the
Absolutely.
first fundamental of autonomy.
Yeah.
If you fail to do that, you will not be able to, you will not do justice in
Hmm.
delegation. You,
Hmm.
because this person may come up with results which is too far from your expectation, which is waste of time for both of you,
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
right? And second comes, how comfortable is this person with autonomy? There is your mentorship piece which comes,
Hmm.
and you
Hmm.
will
Hmm.
find that if you have three different PMs, they need or they can afford different levels of autonomy.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
But this is not your call to make. This is
Hmm.
your call to empower the PM to make. That transparency has to come from your PM, that this is what I'm comfortable with, this is where I need to help. Again, this is what your role in my life.
Hmm.
So,
Interesting.
so some PMs want more support on the craft. Some PMs need more support in stakeholder management. They are not really
Hmm.
good at resolving conflicts in meeting rooms. Some
Hmm.
PMs need support in running big meetings. They're
Hmm.
not
Hmm.
able to get the right conclusions out of meetings. But
Hmm.
it's a different conversation. It is about how you develop those PMs. But
Yeah.
eventually, my intention is very clear, or my expectation from a senior product manager is very clear, that if I define a problem and an outcome, I want you to be able to run the whole show.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you to be able to say the things you need help with, the things you need mentorship with.
Yeah. So I have one condition there as well. I say that first of all, you should be able to run the whole show, and second, at any point of time, if I poke you, you should be clearly able to articulate where we are today, what is the plan, and when is the next checkpoint.
Hmm. Got it.
Right? Because for me that is important, because I cannot keep tabs of who is where at what point. So I have to
Hmm.
keep uh, really, I have to rely on them, that they get my attention sufficiently in advance when they need me, as well as they keep reporting me on progress and uh, FII loops on progress.
Got it. Yeah. This reminds me of, I spoke with a VP of product at Paytm, Deepak once, and I think folks of you, he did a call, similar webinars here recently. He talked about one of his best PMs. I asked him, right, what was one of your best PMs? And he's like, this guy, every day at the same time, he would catch me between meetings and make me sit down for 20 minutes and tell me what was happening, right? Regardless of me
Mhm.
asking. And have this articulated update and make sure I'm in the loop, and whatever he needed from me, he made sure I heard at the same time every day. And he like remembered that because he was like, this guy was so successful because of this little thing he did again and again. And he exercised his autonomy so effectively to make sure his voice got heard and his cheerleading happened, and to do that. So really, it just reminded me of that instance. Sorry, you want to keep going? Yeah, we go to mastery and purpose also. Yeah.
Yeah. So second, so by the way, one thing is like when we talk about this, but it's important to know we are talking about that individual. So this autonomy is his demand, not what you have to give. right?
Hmm.
So we sometimes, in fact, in the conversation, I got also a little confused where I said, okay, autonomy is something you give, is not in this more important is in autonomy is somebody what somebody needs to be motivated. Same
Yeah.
thing is mastery. So mastery has two parts to it. Uh, very bluntly said, mastery means I should feel I'm getting better at doing my job better,
Hmm.
right? First of all, important is that feel. Uh, you cannot. It's not an exam grade that you can give. Okay, in math you got 67, now you got 78,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
So for somebody to feel he's good, he or she is getting much better at its own job, he needs or she needs to know what is a job, what was the outcome
Hmm.
expected, was the outcome met,
Hmm.
this time how much resistance did I face, and if what does improvement mean for me, right?
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
mastery has this part of very clear role definition, what is expected
Hmm.
of me, what is good, and feedback.
Hmm.
So you
Absolutely.
have to have quality feedback to actually make a person feel that person is improving,
Yeah.
right? Because many times with the absence of feedback, this person may be actually improving, but you only
But they
tell
don't
him
know.
once the person has put in the resignation paper. The
Yeah.
moment you resign,
Absolutely.
you said, why did you resign?
Yeah.
He said, because I thought I was sucking at my job. He said, no, you're actually doing great, but why didn't you tell me?
Nobody. Yeah, nobody said so. Yeah.
I actually only go to people who cause problems to me. So the fact that I didn't come to you, which means you were actually doing great.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
That's so interesting. Yeah.
so
I think
quality
a lot of us
feedback.
tend to do that, right? We tend to over-index on people who are not doing their job versus the guys who are doing their job very well. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the thing. So people who were not working well get a lot of your attention. They never resign. But people who are working well, they tend to be ignored. And they said, okay, my
Time to
boss
move.
doesn't care about me. I'll go.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, so this is mastery, and last but bit is purpose. And another let's say uh, caveat here: this purpose is not a larger than life purpose of what is the purpose of life, or what is the purpose of the company.
Hmm.
Very classic case. In Blacklane, which was airport transfer company, we used to charge 150 euros, 150 euros from a transfer from IGI airport to Noida,
Okay. Hmm.
12,000 rupees.
Hmm.
Uh, and my boss said that, oh, people should not work in this company for money. They should come for a love of their job.
Okay.
And I was like, what the F are you talking about? Nobody woke up one day and thought I should make life of the rich people better by making them easier to get to their plush hotels from the airport. And
Yeah.
I will work for that for free, right? So it
Yeah.
is all
Yeah.
about money in that sense.
Yeah.
Here, when I talk about purpose, it's about the purpose of that person. Like, what is that purpose that person is trying to achieve?
Hmm. Hmm.
So even if that person wants to be a millionaire, you have to really understand, do you want to be a millionaire in 1 year, or you want to be in 5 years? In
Yeah.
5 years, how can I space that 5 years? What do you need? So maybe let's say you cannot make 1 million in my company, you can make 1 million in Google, but for
Hmm.
you to be at Google, you have to be this kind of a PM, and I can help you be that PM.
Hmm.
So eventually, then the purpose for this 1 year for him or her is to be that PM.
Yeah.
Or somebody says, I want to run my own startup. Okay, what is
Hmm.
stopping you from your own startup today? Okay,
Hmm.
coming back, I mean, I'm not confident in my these skills. Okay, I
Hmm.
can help you be confident in those skills. So that is the
Hmm.
purpose of that. So again, autonomy is the fact that I have very I know I have a lot of room to play, but I know that even if I fail, it will not break the company. So
Yeah.
I am operating within very well defined boundaries, but I have rooms to play around.
Yeah.
Mastery, that I feel that I'm actually getting better at things, which means my confidence in my autonomy improves, my autonomy itself
Hmm.
improves.
Hmm.
And second, I find purpose of being here.
Hmm. Hmm.
That this being here is solving something in my life.
Yeah.
So that forms intrinsic motivation. And now I hope I have able to highlight how important is so much like clarity at all levels, uh, about the role, about what the team is supposed to do, what success looks like, what is the goal, and eventually feedback. Feedback means how do I perceive you individually, and how are you part of performing against my plan for you.
Got it. And so how do you, I don't know if this is on the next one, but oh yeah, should we, I was going to
Oh
ask this,
yes.
right? So before I open that next slide, so how do actually, we've talked a lot about levels of clarity at the org level, at the topmost level, right? So between goals
Mhm.
and resources, methods. We've talked about it at a personal level, how you have to kind of deeply understand. And I think folks on the call, I know we're going very deeply into different specific, principles or subject matters, but I think it also illustrates the first principles thinking Sid is coming from. There's not going to be a plain vanilla answer to a specific question, but it is, I think what we're trying to do is zoom out and give you principles to approach it, right? And so thanks a lot, and I said just to kind of deep dive with us. So I think this brings me to the next one: is how does a leader then go about taking these principles, understanding this stuff, and actually put it in the works, right? And put it into the organization, drive it through. And just for a time check, we're at about 10:10. We're going to do this maybe another 10 minutes on this, and then maybe we leave the last 10 minutes to maybe wherever we've reached, kind of just take folks' questions and kind of go into any specific topic in general. Okay.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. So this is a very unconventional way of looking. So don't quote me on this. Just stay with my story,
Hmm.
because this is something I like the Europe versus India part. I can explain most well through this slide. Right.
Hmm.
Because in my so when I talk about India, I also have people who have worked with me. From my boss is from India. One of my PMs, my team is from India,
Hmm.
and I've seen one more thing. One more thing is like Indians typically operate on the model which I look at on the left. It is
Outlook
outlook
centric.
centric,
Hmm.
which means I am a leader. I want to integrate Domino's to my product.
Hmm.
I will have clarity. I have an outlook in my head. I have not thought this thing through, but I will go to a meeting, bring everyone to us in, and I will share everything I have to offer. Which
Hmm.
means I move people from unclarity to clarity,
Sure.
right? But then people leave the room and they go about their job. But then as time passes, they move from clarity to unclarity
Hmm.
because more uncertainties evolve. But what is important is that there is no documentation. There is no written down structured communication. Every time you have a question, you have to put that one person back in the room, and this person will
Hmm.
again give lay out the things for you, and then again things people will have clarity. Again, this will go.
Go back.
So
Correct.
so and in India, typically we end up like this. And the good way to say is that a PM going to a team and say, guys, we have to launch two-factor authentication in next 2 weeks. Let's go to a room and brainstorm.
Hmm. 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 Hmm.
That's a typical attitude where you rely on this verbal communication, and uh, and you create details on the fly,
Got
right?
it. Hmm.
So this is how I would say people in India are used to, and this takes a lot of your individual time to constantly be creating clarity with your team,
Absolutely.
because you
Hmm.
you are yourself the bottleneck, because you have thought, you have a mental model, and
Hmm.
you are
Hmm.
trying
Hmm.
your team to adapt to a central mental model.
Hmm.
What happens is that you may actually have binary experience. Either you're extremely frustrated because your team does not get, or they always wave off the
Hmm.
path, or you have
Hmm.
a great experience because you have been working with this team so long that team
Hmm.
really understands how you think, or there's a
Hmm.
great match of thinking. Then you have
Hmm.
a very great relationship because you say, "Arey, this guy is almost completing my songs."
Yeah. Yeah.
So I I really, and there's strength and benefits for that. So if you are
Yeah.
actually working with these people, this actually works great if you're working in pairs. So
Okay.
sometimes it happens you have two data scientists in a team, or you have a
Ah.
senior data scientist and a data scientist,
Sure.
right? So one is coordinating the other. Then you don't need documentation. Then
Hmm.
this relationship or this framework works.
Yeah.
But if a VP is using that, then there is a problem, because
Yeah.
the decisions are not locked down, the boundary conditions are not locked down, uh,
Hmm.
and everybody is trying to guesstimate on what the VP wants,
Hmm. 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 Hmm.
right? Uh, and for me, what happened was like also in US and India, one thing is very common. If VP comes with a project, their juniors are really enthusiastic to take on that project, and they want to take on this new project. In
Hmm.
Europe, you need to write a 3-pager before you can delegate anything. Yeah,
That's
because
amazing. Okay.
my boss faced that, because here people ask, why do we need to integrate with Domino's? Why do we need to do it now? Why couldn't this wait? Why this project is better than the other project I'm doing? What is success? uh, how will I know that we are going in the right direction? And unless you answer all this question, people won't even sweat.
Oh.
So, but this is for me. It was a very. It was a great thing because it puts what it solves. Another thing is, as a VP, you cannot now throw 50 balls in the air because I have to write my own 3-pager.
Yeah.
There is only limited number of 3 pages I can write.
Yeah.
Which means, and when I'm writing, I'm also now answering all those questions. I'm getting more clear as to this project really important.
Yeah.
Which means that I'm applying a much stronger filter on what goes down to my team than before. Otherwise, I could just come up with ideas. My job becomes thinking ideas, throwing it to my team, and team starting to create details for me. Which is basically expanding the funnel too soon and expanding a much bigger cost. Second is what I call is like my Xiaomi vacuum cleaner model. So this is my floor map of my apartment, how Xiaomi cleans my apartment. So which means there is a very clear go, like certain zones and uncertainty zones. Like this is what we know, this is what we don't know. And where we know, we are very efficiency focused. So most of the, let's say, managers in big companies like here are like here, where they're efficiency focused. They're trying to either optimize conversion or reduce, make customer care more efficient. They rely on systems and processes. And my vacuum cleaner actually tries to optimize the algorithm for the map it already has. And for the unknown area, it goes and explores.
Got it.
So
this is a WAG, right? The yellow dot is the WAG going around. This is the known areas, and then these unknown areas. Got it. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So what most managers do really well is that they are very good to articulate what is that we do, how do we do it, and how you can do it even better. So what is my ideas to make it more efficient? And these are the areas we don't know about, and this is when we will explore more. So first, let's extract juice from here. We will then go and explore new frontiers. Most managers are good at this, but the problem happens is there is a lot of focus on how, but less focus on why, and also who. And my last model is more about, let's say, preparation. These are actually, imagine you are in a let's say you're in a maze, and these are all doors. You or let's say your PM is going for this maze, and he has to open a lot of doors. Now you don't know what's on the other side of the door. So you have to prepare your PM to decide on her feet the moment he or she opens the door. Like, is it good? Is it bad? Then you focus on your core principles. You don't focus on exactly the process. You don't focus on anything. You focus on core principles. You try to explain this person what is good, what is bad. If this is this, do this. So you are focusing more on and this is true for a CEO who is hiring his core team. So a CEO, when he's hiring a head of marketing, he doesn't want to teach this person marketing. He wants to teach if you come across 3 different options, how do we select options?
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
A great summary to close all this is, imagine your kid is going to college. Right? First one is you being on the phone for your kid all the time, and the kid calling you whenever he has problem, and you create clarity. Second is you going with the kid. If the kid is going to US for college, you going with the kid to the US. You go and meet his professors, you buy him or you find him an apartment, you set him up, you explain how everything works and how to operate his life. So you actually set him up for success. Third is your kid is going to college, you teach him values or her values. You teach him, okay, stay away from drugs, save money, and do this.
Stay safe.
Yeah, exactly. So these are 3 different levels of, let's say, leadership in which you can actually behave.
What works for you?
Different
stages.
So I would say, I think initially, of course, fastest you get to the center is the best. because then at
Okay.
least you are very clear on, you can onboard people very well. You can very easily explain what is that you do, what your role of your function is. But eventually, for a high performing org, you have to actually move as much right. So wherever you
Yeah.
are, just you have to keep moving right. You have to
Towards
really
citizen
focus on the core
centricity.
values.
Got it. Got it. Great. Bharat, thanks for the reminder. Yeah. So, guys, I think, I mean, we've kind of got through maybe, two-thirds of the questions. And I think this was, yeah, I hope everybody else was kind of following and enjoying it. This was obviously talking about how we all can create clarity, really interesting frameworks or ways of doing that. So, we're going to leave the rest of this conversation a little bit open-ended for questions, unless, Sid, you want to cover something quickly. But we have about, 12 to 13 minutes. And then we want to kind of ask any questions you guys have. I can kind of ask them out here. There's some compliments coming. Shrikant really likes the analogy, and he emphasizes it's very helpful in remembering these. Um, there's a couple of questions, booking.com specific. Said you want to take those? Just kind of quickly ask you. I
Yeah,
think they're
sure.
basically like how you guys weathering the storm, right? I think in a nutshell, that's what folks are asking is like how is Booking.com weathering this crazy storm, given it's in the travel industry. We've obviously seen some of the more public stuff, but how maybe also you can talk about how you guys weathering the storm internally from driving clarity and kind of moving teams into the right frameworks and the right new way to operate.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, in fact, my next slide was could have been that, but let's not get to the slide.
Should I do
What
it? I
is
can I can quickly or
Yeah, okay, okay. Yeah.
yeah
So in
yeah. Yeah.
fact, my this is actual screenshot from one of my memos I wrote to my team, and
Hmm.
this is highly inspired by how our CEO has approached the situation.
Okay.
Uh, so first and foremost, our CEO, when it started all, okay, he made this announcement that he has been part of many such crises in the past. One thing is common about all crises: it will end. And
Hmm.
second is fundamental truth of travel is people will travel. Uh,
Hmm.
uh, Now their behavior might change. We don't know, uh, but people will travel. So we have to focus on the end of the tunnel, not at the tunnel itself.
Hmm.
Back then, the outlook was that this thing will be over in a year.
Hmm.
Uh, and Booking being the strongest, like the biggest travel company, he also mentioned like at that this point, being big is good. In most
Hmm.
other cases, being big means you're a dinosaur, you're too slow. It's not a
Hmm.
good sign. But in
Hmm.
this case, being big is good because you have a lot of money in the bank.
Hmm.
Uh,
Hmm.
so, and question he asked is like, uh, when we talked about what does it mean for us in the company,
Hmm.
what should we stop working on things we're working? Has the plans changed and everything?
Hmm.
And he said, what did COVID actually change? Did it change
Hmm.
our outlook for 2020? Did it change our entire outlook for the 3 years? We did a 3-year planning this time for new businesses like us. So did it change our entire outlook for 3 years in 2022?
Hmm.
Did it change the fundamental customer behavior, or did it change the underlying market itself, the
Hmm.
demand, point, supply, and everything?
Hmm.
We only know the answer for first, that yes, 2020 has changed.
Hmm.
We can only speculate for other things.
Hmm.
So, and he says like, and basically the point being that we would respond, not react to this situation. So we will first try to really understand as much as we can about the other three bullets.
Yeah.
So we will interview our customers, we will interview our partners. We will really understand. Only once we have evidence on a certain thing, we will formulate a new plan. So again,
Hmm.
clarity is expensive process. So we'll go through
Yeah.
this entire clarity creation process, but we'll
Hmm.
do it once. We will not do
Hmm.
knee-jerk reaction.
Correct.
However, given we had autonomy, it made sense for us to basically apply a COVID filter to our existing roadmaps, which means
Okay.
since let's say in my business, I am food and travel, restaurant in traveling, both are shut.
Hmm. Hmm.
so
Yeah.
so in my business, I have zero traffic right now.
Hmm. Hmm.
So zero traffic means I cannot validate a lot of experimentation.
Sure.
So my team was only told, let's say I agree with my team that we will apply a filter of what is actually tactically not possible. So, and let's take all those things out of the roadmap and push it to the end. Let's
Yeah.
keep doing other things because on the fundamental on which we created the roadmap, they are still valid. People will
Yeah.
travel, and when they will travel, they will eat 3 meals in a day. So they
Hmm.
will need
Hmm.
that support. So we will still build for that reality.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
However, if now their need has changed, we will first learn about that need and then come up with a new plan to
Hmm.
answer that. So
Address it.
coming back to this in booking, how is booking doing? I think overall, of course, we are very low in terms of our volumes. Travel has been hit. We have been looking for different ways for us to get support from different governments in terms of
Hmm.
uh, extending our uh, runway in terms of key having, let's say, our CEO wants to protect job, but our
Hmm.
volumes are much lower, which means a lot of our resources are volume based.
Hmm.
So, and for us to afford those extra resources, we have to have support from the government. So we are
Yeah.
going through those processes. But in the internally, the way we responded to this, I feel very comfortable with that because this is very much in line with. It shows a lot of trust in the planning process in the beginning, and reduces panic, reduces stress and anxiety because everybody is anxious at a personal level. Everybody is scared for their family's health, their own
Hmm.
health.
Hmm.
You don't want to
Hmm.
pile on with them with additional uncertainty.
Yeah. I love the second half of this slide, guys. For those of you who are smart, have figured out who this is referring to. And it's very very well. I love the last line. And I think I was hearing someone talk and say that this is the first time where, oh no, hopefully the not the first time, but one of the times where everybody's market share is the same place, which is zero. So when it comes to competitors, do not, like, the exactly right, the response is unknown, and to a lot of folks it's the same. Don't just look at over your shoulder and say they're doing this and we need to do this, because everybody's going to have the most educated person is going to have the best approach. You want to quickly touch upon it? It's a very interesting nugget you put there. So I think people will enjoy it.
Yeah, absolutely. So my team asked the same question. One of our competitors actually responded very fast, and they launched online experiences. So you can online watch Venice, and you can sit here and learn cooking, Italian cooking from Italian. And our team was like, we should also do something like that. And
Hmm.
I was only pointing to the unknowns, like what are their objectives behind this move, we don't know. What were their
Hmm.
resources? uh, for us, we don't have customer care resources in our team, but they might have. So that might be a stronger overlap for them versus us. Did they solve a major customer problem in this time? Do really people want to look at Venice through a online video show? uh,
Hmm.
did it solve a lot of internal jobs? Will this be the future of attraction? And have they already acquired a first mover advantage in that? So
Hmm.
uh, let's say we cannot say anything for certainty. So in
Hmm.
that sense, uh, and I was actually very clear that I'm not downplaying their efforts. I'm only saying is that they are responding at a large in the same way. They're first trying to ensure financial stability for the company. They are
Hmm.
still protecting their core marketplace. They're also equally clueless about how COVID has impacted them. This was just a very small portion of their response, and the real response is yet to come. So
Yes, yet
same
to come.
way for us,
Absolutely.
that we should not be distracted by these small news, but we should actually focus always at the core of the problem.
Very well articulated. One of your friend and a person I admire a lot, Prashant. I think Prashant Singh is asking a question. Can you talk about the RAMA framework, Rama framework for persuasion? I don't know. I think it's something you both know something about, and I think he's bringing it up because it may be useful. Guys, just quickly, Bharat, if you don't mind, maybe we'll just stack on another 5-7 minutes. Folks who want to drop off, go ahead. Some folks still have some questions. Sid, if you're okay, maybe we just go
Yeah,
another
yeah,
10. Yeah, cool.
yeah.
So
Not
Prashant has a question, then there are two more, and so let's maybe start there and then yeah.
Yeah. So Rama framework is interesting. It's a Rama is stands for rejection, anger, malleability, and acceptance.
Okay, rejection,
So
anger, malleability, and acceptance. Okay.
yes. So
Yeah.
basically, if I go to you and I give you, I have a ridiculous ask, like
Hmm.
like I need 10 resources for this thing. You will
Hmm.
reject my idea.
Hmm.
If I keep at it, you will first get angry that why am I coming at you again and again.
Hmm.
But if I still don't give up, you will be okay. Let's talk about it.
Hmm.
And finally, there'll be a phase where he will accept some or part of my request.
Hmm.
So I think he's talking more about that. That's basically a framework for persuasion, and mostly works with stakeholders who are hardballing you.
Yeah, you kind of use them in every situation. Very interesting. Is
Yeah.
there an inside story to that? Why he asked that question, or is something you guys have talked about in the past?
Yeah, I think we do talk about a lot of different things. Like I think, Prashant also has very simplistic view on very complex problems, and
Yeah.
it's always great to exchange notes with him.
Yeah, absolutely. I think very well said. Dinesh had a question around, is there a cultural aspect to how folks behave and see that? So I think this is connected to autonomy, mastery, purpose, right? So the question around the cultural aspects of how folks behave and they see their job, how do you kind of handle that cultural aspect? Because sometimes for a lot of us, that hiring across a cultural spectrum is not really very possible, right? So what's your take
Yes.
on, how that kind of plays out?
Yes, of course. I think in India, especially, we have, let's say in India, we don't have often very multinational workforce. In fact, there are very few deep markets in the world. There is US, there is India, there is China, where
Hmm.
most of the people are so domestic in that sense. Like
Hmm.
these markets alone can win you the game. You don't have to step out
Hmm.
in terms of talent as well as sometimes in terms of market and everything.
Hmm.
So India has one base thing. Second is like we are a very sensing uh, communication style. We are not
Hmm.
direct,
Hmm.
right? There's a lot of assumption, a lot of in between the lines.
Okay.
And when you are in, let's say, Europe, you actually get people from all over the world,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? And so it puts a lot of stress on communication. Uh,
Okay.
what the way we deal with is like that's why there's a lot of focus on written communication.
Okay.
Uh, in fact, PMs always like when we use the word documentation, we think documentation is that silly book which comes with your washing machine and you throw it in the garbage, uh, something like that. Or we think
Hmm.
about documentation as some tech documentation.
Hmm. Hmm.
But actually, Amazon does it very well. For them, documentation is like a PR release.
Yeah. Yeah.
And for PMs, that is what it is. Like documentation means one pager writing as to why we are doing this, what we want to achieve out of this, and where will we go,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? Second is we simplify English a lot. You cannot use complex vocabulary. You have to use very simple words.
Yeah, I saw that in your email writing. I mean, it was very
Yeah.
broken down into very specific things. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and second, there is a lot of explicit communication. Like I
Hmm.
told you, like, nobody will ask you what does my boss do.
Hmm. Hmm.
And in
Hmm.
Europe, in especially in multicultural, you have to explicitly say a lot of things.
Yeah.
Uh, and so I think you have to be very conscious about what's on people's mind. You
Hmm.
have to really explicitly call out all. Let's say this: all communication. All it's like Murphy's law. All questions which can arise will arise. So
Of course.
you have to answer all those questions for your people. So it takes a lot of, let's say, uh, uh, it's a steep learning curve on communication style. You
Hmm.
have to work on that, and I think eventually, when your communication bar gets so high, you can actually operate at a much smaller base of common understanding. You don't
Yeah.
need everybody to agree on everything. You need everybody to understand what you're trying to do.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually, and maybe quickly you can tell me how you've done this, but I am a big believer in written communication. I've been trying for many years to make it a core philosophy of how we all communicate as leaders and product managers. What's worked with you to inspire other people to operate in the same way? I mean, I do it a lot personally. I've suddenly got some people doing it, not suddenly, over a period of time. What's helped you in getting other people to also operate through a lot more written and thoughtful communication? Because we're so
Uh,
used to just ping us, right? Ping me and we get it done. Yeah.
so when I shape my team, I put
Hmm.
so one thing is another. Yeah, good point.
Hmm.
So while all of us want great outcomes, we only control certain inputs.
Hmm.
So we used to always say, you must have heard when you're preparing for exams, don't try to control the outcome, control your preparation. So prepare
Ah.
well, outcome will happen, right?
Hmm.
So same thing is for your PMs. I have an IDP for every PM, individual development
Hmm.
plan,
Hmm.
right? And in this IDP, we address two parts. Uh, One is what is impact and how is behavior. So,
Hmm.
so what is that you are expected to deliver and how will you deliver that? And
Hmm. Hmm.
how has communication craft,
Hmm.
leadership, there are certain subparts to it.
Hmm.
But to jump into your problem, specifically on written skills,
Hmm.
first thing I always put a stage gate before we start off any project is to let's clear clarity and do a kickoff where you have
Hmm.
to explain, you have to really onboard a lot of stakeholders onto a project.
Hmm.
Second, I give them specific feedback on how they're running meetings.
Hmm.
Uh, Lastly, given that we are in the asynchronous world, uh, it's always good to send pre-reads before the meetings. So all my teams
Yeah.
are really good at sending pre-reads. This just sets in a culture of writing, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
Absolutely.
and and second is like then of course Google and many things do very
Sure.
well is that you not only if there's a complex topic, not only you can send a pre-read, you can send pre-read almost like 7 days in advance
Yeah.
and ask people to send comments by certain end of the day.
Yeah.
And that works because you have to say that okay, I'm closing all feedback now, so send in your comments by today evening so that we can discuss tomorrow all at one go,
Absolutely. Yeah, and
right? So
it's magical to do that. You get so much thinking done as a group before you meet that you're fairly clear when you get into that and kind of go into execution for sure. The thing that Sid mentioned, guys, highly recommend looking it up. Amazon's PR release, there's a bunch of writing on it on the internet. It's a fantastic way to approach how they do it. They do a lot of pre-read, or I think they block like the beginning of a meeting. Everybody reads the document that is telling everybody about the meeting, so they can just focus on decisions. Again, very highly recommended to folks out there. Before Bharat cuts me off, I think we're pretty much done. Bharat, any closing thoughts? There's a couple of questions still, but Bharat, if you say, I will wrap up. Let me know. Um,
I think the nature of questions are pretty much covered in
yeah, yeah,
um,
yeah,
conversation
absolutely.
until now. So I think we can end now. So
Sounds
thanks
good.
everyone for joining, and thanks Siddharth. I think it was a wonderful conversation, well moderated. I've started getting a lot of WhatsApp messages already. Dhruv, well moderated. Team members
Thank you,
happy.
sir.
Sanjay also messaged that he couldn't join, but he would love to look at the recording. So thanks
Yeah,
everyone for joining. Have a great night. Good night, everyone.
thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks a lot, Sid.
and
It was fantastic. I think
yeah,
recording, some folks asked Bharat, recording and slides, will they be available?
Yeah, so what I could do is I have the list of participants. I could possibly email them with the
Okay,
slide. And anyways, it's recorded on YouTube and YouTube Live is on, so I can just share that link with them.
great.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. Good
and
night,
thanks
guys.
Thanks,
Dhruv,
Sid.
it was great,
Thanks.
thanks Brad,
Yeah, good
and
night.
thanks
Bye,
guys
guys.
for joining. Bye bye.
Yeah, bye.